Welcome to Spotlight ETSU. I'm your host, Carrie Oliveira. Today, our guest is Dr. Andrew Dunn, Program Head of Journalism at ETSU. Dr. Dunn has recently received national attention for his research on fandom and Comic-Con. Welcome, Dr. Dunn.
Hi, thanks for having me.
How did you come to be at ETSU?
I got my PhD at Alabama and I started looking around for jobs, and this job came up and it seemed like a pretty cool campus, and I liked the people that I met, and the program seemed like a good fit, so that's how I ended up here.
How long have you been here?
I've been here since 2007, so give or take a little over 3 years.
Years. That's cool. Before this, you were a journalist.
Yeah, I worked as a newspaper reporter for about almost a decade, on and off. I was started out doing advertorials, writing advertisements. I did glowing reviews of restaurants I never ate in and mattress stores.
So what you're saying is journalism is a whole bunch of lying.
That part is advertising. That was not journalism, but it got me my foot in the door. And then I got work doing some writing obituaries as a news assistant, which seems kind of sad work, but it's actually, after a while, it just becomes real mundane, so you're just like tippity-tap.
Are they all different obituaries?
Well, there's a formula. Usually every paper has its own formula for writing it, so like, you know, you say, John Edward Smith, comma, 57,
42.
comma, died of a heart attack Thursday, blah, 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 blah. And then it's like you list all the people that they were survived by.
Or sad and crying, and then what groovy thing he ever did in his life.
And then what church they're a member of, and what groups they're a member of, and all that sort of thing. So, you know, Wednesdays, oddly enough, Wednesdays is the day for obituaries. Like, a lot of people want to be buried on Sunday or Saturday. And so all the obituaries like compiling in on Wednesday. So you're spending Wednesday doing all this obituary work. So I did that for...
I had no idea you ever wrote obituaries.
Oh, yeah. So I did that for almost a year. And then I started doing some part-time work. On top of that, so I would do the obituaries, and then I kept telling the editors, like, look, I can be a reporter. Give me a story.
Trust
and
me.
it's like, yeah, whatever, kid. And I said, no, for reals. Give me a story. And yeah, whatever. And so finally, they would give me like a weekend story, and I'd go cover, I don't know, some crap festival nobody went to.
Like a pet show.
Right, or something. And so I go and cover that, and I'd scribble up something, and they'd say, yeah, that was okay. And then I keep doing that and keep doing that. And then they promoted me to full-time, and then I started laying out pages and doing design work.
Oh.
So I put pictures and cut lines. You know that, like the family page that has like the cut line, like you and your
What's a cut line?
cat. Cut line is that thing that runs underneath the photo. So you got the photo, and then you got the cut line.
Isn't that called a caption?
It's also known as a caption, but in the business we usually call that a cut line.
All right.
And so you have a picture of like two kittens, and then it says, you know, Socks and Boopers are enjoying Halloween or something because they're in a pumpkin. I don't know, whatever. And so you design a little page of that. And
right.
I would design other pages and, you know, flow in copy and pictures and all that. And I said, I don't want to do
hate this.
Yeah, I don't hate it. This isn't what I want to do. I want to write. Give me writing assignments. And so,
did you want to do the writing, or did you want to do the investigating?
A little bit of both. I mean, I got into journalism because I like to write.
Okay.
That's why I went into journalism. I was like, I started out as a biology major, and I said, I don't want to spend the rest of my life hunched over a microscope. So
that's not a good look for you.
Literally what I said. And also I didn't want to take calculus. So I was like, what could I go into where I can write and I can write. And journalism
and not have
was
to do
it.
Calculus.
Right. And so journalism was it. So I went in journalism, but you know, I really love the investigative side of it. I like the research. I like the reporting.
Yeah.
And also, I like writing for a living. I mean, who doesn't want to write for a living? I mean, it's
a lot of people.
Well, okay, but there are a lot of us out there that love writing.
That is true.
We like meeting people and hearing their stories. I mean, look at you.
And telling stories.
You're here doing an interview, listening to my stories. I mean, you hear me talk all the time anyway, because we're in the same department.
It's
but
true.
you hear me talk all the time.
Yes.
So, but you still are interested in things I might have to say, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, some of the best stories I ever wrote were about people that were completely mundane, seemed like they would be a terribly uninteresting story, and turns out to be wildly fantastic.
Because of them?
Yeah, because of their life experience. It's like the Forrest Gump kind of situation. You know, normally Forrest Gump just dude on a bench, but you don't realize all his backstory.
Right.
So I had this school board member, whose name I cannot remember right now, But I had to do a profile on her because she was new on the school board. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, whatever. Another school board member profile. But it turned out she was a fire baton twirler.
Wow.
She was a Mississippi beauty queen. And the best part, she turned down Elvis Presley for a date.
Shut up.
For real. I mean,
did you believe her?
Yeah.
Why would you believe that?
Because
I turned down Norman Reedus last week. Come on now. No, okay.
But you had no way. I mean, she had a whole story that she was a Mississippi beauty queen. She was in the pageant.
It makes sense.
He's from Mississippi.
He's got a type.
He was in town doing something, and he had seen her at the thing and was like, hey, you know, maybe later we could go grab some dinner or something.
And she just went, nah.
Yeah. And also because it was part of the rules is they weren't, this was a long time ago, it was part of the rules you weren't allowed to go out, you know, and have dates.
Canoodle.
Right.
Right.
We got to keep the purity of the beauty queens of Mississippi. So anyway, so she turned down the night. I mean, fascinating. I was interested in the fire baton twirling story too.
That's totally cool.
I can't do that. So she would go out on the field during football games, and she'd have this whole fire baton routine. I mean, we're talking about this very, I'm glad I didn't name her because she's a very grandmotherly kind of woman.
Sort of school marmish, I would imagine.
Very school marmish. That's why she's a school board member. But then she's got this real wild kind of
So life. You spent how long being a journalist then?
I started doing advertorials in '97 and I got out in 2007.
So you were writing while you were going to graduate school?
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Yeah, I started at Alabama in 2007, but I was working full-time at the paper and doing my master's at FSU as well. So I'd go there, I'd get to work at 7 in the morning, I'd leave around lunchtime, I'd go to my class, and I'd come back and I'd work until about 7 that night, working as a journalist.
That's how graduate students are supposed to function. Hard work, constant, busting your butt.
I don't know any different.
That's just life.
It is what it is.
They haven't figured that out yet. So how did you decide? So you were a jourналist and you were enjoying it and you got to tell like interesting people's stories, which is a really groovy job. And then what made you go to grad school?
I'd always kind of had it in my mind that I wanted to do graduate work, and FSU had this really cool degree that was a degree in mass communication or communication with emphasis in new and interactive technology. And that really excited me. I was interested in multimedia. I was interested in, I already saw the writing on the wall, and I'm not prophetic or anything. I just saw that multimedia was going to be a bigger deal. I designed my first web pages in '96.
That's like basically when the internet was born.
Yeah, and I was doing 96, 97, and I was doing HTML, actual HTML coding, and we thought we were cool. I mean, we thought we were really advanced. Like, I did this page, and it looked like a 4-year-old had put it together. But,
of course, but you know what?
And it had GIFs, and it had, flaming skulls that would turn around, and, all the kind of
That's
stupid...
That's exactly what I imagined your first webpage to look
all
like.
The kind of stupid things that you could do back then.
Right.
But I go out as a reporter at one point, and I go to a 3rd grade classroom. And I'm an education reporter, so I'm covering K-12. So I had to go to a 3rd grade classroom. And there are these 3rd graders, and they're designing web pages.
No.
Yeah. Now, they're not using HTML, but still, they're designing web pages.
Right.
I'm thinking, and that's a moment when I look at it and go, I'm already a dinosaur.
Yeah.
Like the kids that are coming up, and for the people that are in this university, your younger brothers and sisters are already more advanced than you are.
It's true.
And every generation is more advanced, so you've got to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard to keep up.
My 2-year-old niece can navigate an iPod. I can't barely work this tablet thing I've got here. It's amazing.
I mean, you think about it, that people automatically, particularly at that age, start to develop almost muscle memory of how to interact with devices.
Right.
She knows how to touch an iPad and that's going to stick with her the rest of her life.
Yes.
So this idea of sitting at a computer where you and I automatically our hand goes like this, right? If I ask you to assume the position, you automatically do like this, because that's what you've grown accustomed to.
Right.
And she's going to be like this.
She's going to swipe.
And that's a profound change over the years, and something that as you are born into a generation that has known nothing but touchpads and things. Interesting note. You know where the touchpad got its start?
No. Why do you know this? You know what?
Interesting story.
Okay.
Okay. So 1982, I am a young man, and my parents take us to the World's Fair in Knoxville. And one of the things that debuted at the World's Fair was touchscreens.
You're joking.
Nope, look it up.
What was their application at that time?
I think it was just like a big screen and you could touch things and make things happen. That was about, I mean, it was pretty, yeah. Now, surely there were some prototypes and things that have been developed, but it made a big debut at the Knoxville World's Fair, right?
With the Sun Sphere.
Yeah, with the Sun Sphere. There was also a big thing on Rubik's Cubes and stuff like that.
Nobody cares about Rubik's Cubes.
We did in the 80s.
You know, I was going to actually ask you about this. This is
Yes.
sort of like a later question, but we were having a conversation, you and I, earlier, like a couple weeks ago, about the destigmatization of the word geek.
Yes.
We're going to come to that. So you
Yes.
were in journalism, you went to school, you were interested in new media and media technologies and all of this stuff. And then so you finish your education, you're here. And so this is largely what you focus on teaching students in our mass comm program.
Yeah, I do. I teach right now I'm teaching 2 sections of multimedia production.
And what do you do in that class?
A little bit of everything. So we do, one of their first assignments is to do a blog. So we're using WordPress to kind of get used to that. WordPress is nice because it also has a web design function.
I was going to say, I really thought it was a web building.
But it has a free blog service too. And so you can do that. And it's got a lot of widgets you can play around with. And they do a podcast. So I show them how to use Audacity, which is a free software that you can use to design, you know, a podcast. So you could do this as a podcast instead of doing a live face-to-face TV show. But
then you'd miss all this.
right. So and then they do a sound slides presentation, which is pictures with a soundtrack embedded underneath, so that it's a rotating slideshow, and the sound syncs up with the slides. So, and you've got pan and scan and zoom and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we're working on Thursday. And then we do video. They do a website using Dreamweaver. I don't get too heavily involved because we don't have time to get really heavily involved in HTML, but I do show them some tags, and I show them how to do HTML a little bit. And then we move into kind of a final project where they take
sort of a culminating synthesis.
They take all this and put it together. And it's also an understanding of social media, it's an understanding of multimedia, it's understanding of media convergence. It's skills along with some of the softer kind of skill set, if you will, kind of the understanding of why this is important, why the industry is going this way. And this didn't start in a vacuum. I mean, Nicholas Negroponte has been talking about this since the 70s.
Who is he?
He was a researcher who wanted a foundation, a research wing at MIT, and so he goes to a bunch of business leaders and says, by the year 2000, you know, this idea, everything's going to be converged by the year 2000, that computers and print and the movie industry and broadcasting would all be converged by the year 2000.
And he wasn't wrong, really.
He wasn't, but this is, I believe, 1979 is when he was talking about
That's a lot of foresight.
And so, but the industry's been full of these people for years.
Right.
And it's only now that we're actually starting to see the lumbering industries start to take on this idea that, oh, they weren't kidding. This is actually happening.
I saw an article on the Wall Street Journal on Twitter that made a big deal about how Nielsen is going to start providing rankings based on like how TV shows manifest in social media, like on Twitter and whatever else. It's like, well, yeah, because I interact with Breaking Bad and Catfish when I watch them. So
and a lot of that develops because they understand their audience, and you cannot be in this business if you don't understand audience. And the reason why they do that is because they understand that particularly millennials and people of that generation are multitasking all the time, all the time. So they're never just watching a TV show. They're watching a TV show, they're chatting with friends, maybe they're studying, hopefully, at some point.
I doubt it.
But in the meantime, how can we keep you with our show? How can we keep you there?
Engaged.
We keep you engaged. So you watch the show, and we also invite you. I love The Walking Dead. So you watch The Walking Dead, and they invite you, join us online and enhance your experience. What they mean is, come, we know you're going to multitask, but we'd rather you multitask with us as opposed to multitasking with other people.
Exactly.
So you multitask with us, you stay on our website, you see our advertisers, we get hits because you stay on our site, And so you are engaged the entire hour that the show is on. And oh, by the way, we're also going to have a show afterward called Talking Dead, in which case we're going to continue this.
Yes.
And so we've got you for an hour and a half.
Sucked in.
And then hopefully you'll stick around for Comic Book Men or somebody or some other show
Probably
afterward.
not, though. But maybe, I mean, Walking Dead, Comic Book Men kind of makes sense. Talking about comics
Yes.
and The Walking Dead and fandom in general, which
fandom.
is sort of what we're talking about here.
Right.
This is like your latest thing in terms of your research.
Yeah.
And so you and one of our colleagues, Dr. Andrew Herman, recently went to Dragon Con in Atlanta, and you were interested in studying fandom.
We were. And
Tell me about that.
So this is kind of a natural progression of my own research. I do a lot of research with video games and avatars and the kind of
And
avatars,
identity.
right? And identity and why people choose the identities and avatars and personas that they do for themselves. So Andrew Herman and I were kicking around some ideas. We were already going to go to Dragon Con anyway.
Because you're geeks.
Because we're geeks.
Right.
Which is not a bad label.
No, we'll come to that hopefully if we have time.
No, we're going to talk about that. So we kick around this idea of, hey, why don't we do some research while we're there? We got a grant from the Small Research Grant Program at the Office of Research here at ETSU, which we were very thankful for having.
Indeed.
And so we did that. We bought comics from Atomic Comics downtown Johnson City so that we would have something to give away when people were doing surveys. This all through the IRB. We did all the proper things, and we had a survey. And we wanted to know why people, what were the motivations? Why did you come to Dragon Con? Why did you pick what kind of costume did you wear if you wore one?
Right.
And what kind of representation was that costume? What fan track did it represent? Was it from the Whedonverse? Dr. Herman would be very upset if I didn't mention Joss Whedon at some point.
Yes, he would.
Whedonverse or Doctor Who or Star Trek, which was a very popular one. And we also did some questionnaires about fandom in general. These were based on sports fandom questions.
Right.
So I took sports fandom questionnaires and reverse engineered them or re-engineered them or whatever.
Yeah.
And turned them into geek fandom questions, or as we in the business like to call media fandom.
Medium fandom.
Media fandom is much more refined than geek fandom.
Except that it's not accurate, really. I mean, it is.
Well,
it's not
it's
inaccurate.
media.
But I mean, also geeks self-identify as geeks.
Yes.
Do they not?
It's been a long progression. And one of the things that Herman and I like to say is that geek culture is mass pop culture today.
Yes.
You cannot tell me biggest movies of all time. Look at the list. How many are Batman? How many are Spider-Man? How many are the Lord of the Rings series, the Harry Potter series? We've taken over.
Yes.
I mean,
weird sci-fi fantasy stuff.
We
like,
are
in general.
we are mainstream. We're not the
Periphery.
fringes anymore.
Yes.
We're not the marginalized.
Which is when you and I we're about the same age, right?
Yeah.
And so when you and I were kids, like to have somebody call you a geek or to call somebody else a geek was by no means
Oh yeah,
a
I mean,
compliment.
I'm from Alabama, so I'm gonna blow up on you. So what do you mean? What are you talking about?
Less of that.
But over the years, you start to realize that what's the harm in being called a nerd? I mean, so I'm smart. I'm interested in a lot of things. I'm interested in why things work. I'm interested in science, in technology. I'm interested in things that other people are clearly interested in,
Right.
as evidenced by the big movies of the day.
Right.
What's not
Yeah,
to
I'm just
like
gonna
about
roll
being
with that.
a geek or a nerd? I mean, there's pride in that. And if you want to call it a bad label, you can, but I think most people who consider themselves geeks or nerds or whatever, that we carry it as a badge of honor. And that's actually one of the questions on the survey was, do you consider the terms geek and nerd a badge of honor? And what we found, and this is preliminary data, but what we found is most people that were there did. They were okay with that. We also asked about fandom and would you consider yourself a fanboy or a fangirl, or would you, those kind of questions.
Right.
And we got some interesting results, and we were.
So I know you're in the middle of preliminary analysis. Is there
Yes.
anything particularly interesting you found in your very preliminary analyses?
Yeah, some of the things that I found particularly because I'm a comic book fan, so I was really interested in the fact that a lot of people came to DragonCon for all kinds of media fandom reasons. So they were interested in American sci-fi and fantasy. That was one.
Right.
That was the biggest category, and Star Trek. Those two were high for the reasons why they came. But most of the costumes, or at least the ones that we surveyed, most of the costumes were coming out of comic books, and it's a weird thing that, you know, I'm not a comic book fan, but I want to dress as a comic book
Is that because
character.
they're more iconic? Like, you look
Yes,
at a comic
absolutely.
book
I
character
think
and you're like,
so.
I know what that looks like.
Yeah, and really, what is more iconic than some of the comic book characters we've grown up with? Everyone around the world knows the Batman symbol. You
Yes.
know it. You know, in your head, you already see it.
I saw it.
It's black. It's got the yellow background.
Yep. It's
He
shining in the sky, Gotham
He
City.
hasn't even worn that in the three movies that he doesn't wear that. He doesn't have the yellow symbol across his chest, but you know what it looks like because the iconic.
And it would obscure the washboard on.
Well, and it's not
the
all black,
suit.
and you know, today's Metalocalypse world, everything's got to be black and brutal, and you know, it's got to look like that. So we have to have everything totally blacked out. God forbid some color should creep in.
No, can't have that.
But even colorful characters like the Arrow that's on TV right now, you know, he's the Green Arrow. His green is pretty
Gray.
blackish, drab. I mean, God forbid he should put on a green shirt. I mean, that would be crazy.
Too much.
Too much.
Too colorful.
But it's fascinating to me because so NPR had Neil Gaiman, a famous comic book writer, on one day, and I actually wrote into the show that day. I am that much of a geek. I actually wrote into the show that day, and I said one of the things I love about comic books is comic books are. We in America, we don't have a Norse mythology. We don't have a Arthurian legend. We don't have
Right.
Greek mythology. It is our collective mythology. It is.
That's really cool. I never thought about that.
It is our gods and goddesses and our Mount Olympus. It's all of that.
Yeah.
And we are. It is so ingrained in our. You almost feel like these people are real. You know they're not, but you almost have this sense of.
But in the same way that they're real, that they may be really a potential, like Zeus, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like the Greek gods or whatever. Like,
Right.
maybe real, maybe not. Kind
Yeah,
of like
it's the same kind of
Captain
concept.
America.
And for the record, Gaiman agreed with me, but he said, and the interesting point he made was that, yeah, I agree, and also if you think about it, it is the largest collection of mythology in all mankind. And you think about Greek mythology, you think about Zeus and Hercules and all the characters that come out of that. But then you think about just in Marvel alone, just in DC alone,
Right.
just those two universes alone, how many characters, how many stories. Then you add in the Independence, the Image and the, the Walking Dead, all these, and you start thinking about this pantheon of heroes and villains, and I mean, it's amazing.
And they're all like across the cultures, they're all the same, right? There's like the guy in charge, right?
Yeah.
So if in Greek mythology it would have been Zeus in I don't know, Marvel versus DC, but Captain America versus whoever's in charge of the other one.
Right.
Kind of a thing. And then everybody has a job sort of in like creating social structure.
Right.
Which I think is what's really cool about what you do is this very odd sort of people dress up in costumes and go hang out in Atlanta and meet famous people and do weird stuff.
Right.
But also it's tapping into sort of in like a really fundamental human cultural necessity. It happens in every culture on earth.
Yeah.
And this is just how it's manifested in the United States, really.
And we have so many degrees on campus that speak to this. Journalism, we deal a lot with telling people stories. We have a storytelling program.
We do.
The narrative has always been the compelling piece of this, the story.
Right.
That's what we.
It doesn't matter how you dress it up.
That's what we latch onto. It's the narrative, and we see ourselves in these characters, or we see ourselves in the story, or we find a place somewhere in the story.
Yes. Oh,
So
that's groovy.
Yeah, it's great. I love that.
And we're not the only ones who think your stuff is groovy, because while you and Andrew Herman were in Atlanta at DragonCon, you guys got picked up by USA Today's college
Yes.
correspondent.
Yeah, we did.
And he wrote a little article about how groovy your research is.
Yeah.
And that had to be super validating.
It was very cool. So the story about that was we're driving down to Atlanta. I'm driving, Herman's in the back, and he's following the hashtag DragonCon.
Right.
And he sees on there some reporter had asked, are there any college students that are going to DragonCon we'd like to talk to you? And I said, well, why don't you ask him if he wants to talk to some college professors instead?
We're close.
And sure enough, he did. This is social media in action. This is the power of social media. When you can put it out there and somebody has this request and you link up with that person and suddenly you're in USA Today.
And then you're in USA Today.
Yeah. And I thought, having been a journalist, I thought it was just going to be a kind of a small piece of an overarching story.
Yeah, no, this was about y'all. This entire article.
He did the whole article just
you.
about us. And so our next step is we are going to Nashville Comic-Con. We just got IRB approval for that, and we're going to extend this questionnaire. We're going to take it to Nashville Comic-Con because one of the things we found with Dragon Con is we got a lot of costume players, people who dress up in costume, but we did not get a lot of non-costume players. So we're hoping we'll get more non-costume players when we go to Nashville. So that
see if there's other motivations for going to a Comic-Con event aside from dressing up.
Do a compare and contrast of those two groups.
But Dragon Con is known for costumes.
It is.
Sort of
it is
across
known
the Comic-Cons.
Primarily, it is the cosplay playground. I mean, people come there to really show their stuff. I mean, people have spent thousands of dollars on some of these costumes. And there are contests and money that they win is really not probably comparable to what they've spent.
Right,
on
I was just going to ask you that.
But it's a pride factor, it's an enjoyment factor. And, you know, we wear costumes all the time. Look, I'm in a tie.
You are clearly in a ridiculous costume.
And I'm in a shirt. And why do I do that? Because
you're not wearing your glasses today.
And I'm not wearing my glasses today. And why do I do that? There are different reasons. For one, I don't wear my glasses because of the spotlight would have gotten the glare off the glasses. So
very practical.
Because I do have an
idea
of some of this. But also, why do I wear a tie? Because we know from psychological studies that, you know, the way you dress adds credibility to what you say.
Yeah.
If I'd come in here in a tank top and Daisy Dukes.
First of all, we would all have been offended and terrified.
And you, your crew, and everybody in the audience at home are going to be thankful that I did not do that. But also, you're not going to believe me either.
No,
anything I say is completely out the window because I'm in a tank top and Daisy Dukes.
That is true.
Right?
Although if you would have come dressed up like Batman.
Also might have led to a credibility issue. Maybe, probably not though. Because somebody would have said, okay, he's wearing a costume and it's not Dragon Con, so that's a disc. But that's the beauty of Dragon Con, is you can bring a costume and nobody says anything about it.
And it lends you credibility in that environment, because it's like, yeah, dress up, be weird.
Right, and funny story, so I have my survey and I'm asking this guy who I clearly think is at Dragon Con, and I'm asking him to fill out a survey. Come to find out, he is not at the con, he just dresses like this every day.
What was he dressed as?
It was garish is the word that comes to mind. It was like kind of a tealish blue and then yellow, and his pants were like yellow and blue. And he looked like a comic book character. And I'm thinking...
And surely he wasn't.
He had no idea this was going on. Like he's like, yeah, I just got in town. Like I had no idea this was going on.
Just happened to be dressed that way.
He just found his people
Comic-Con
by accident.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
And I think that's what I love about these conventions, is that people conglomerate, and there's some place for everybody. And I think that's what's really groovy about it.
Right.
I think that you are groovy and all of this research. And so when is the Nashville conference?
It'll be 18th, 19th, and 20th in Nashville.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Stan Lee will be there. Norman Reedus, your boyfriend,
with the poncho
will be there.
And the crossbow and the whole nine.
Bruce Campbell will be there, which is awesome.
Well, I hope that you have a delightful time, and I hope that your research yields something very awesome. This has been a tremendously interesting conversation. I never think about cons and Comic-Cons and whatever else except when I talk to you. Thank you for bringing it to us and making it mainstream. So everybody should check out the article from the USA Today about Drs. Andrew Dunn and Herman. And we want to thank Dr. Dunn for being here with us, talking about journalism and Comic-Con and fandom. And join us next time on Spotlight ETSU.
Thank you.
That really was cool.